What's good, family? Welcome to episode 57 of Stack Sats or Die Trying. This is the Bitcoin Only Show brought to you by the Black Wealth Rebels and by the Hood. I'm your host as always. My name is Jimmy, and this is episode 57, the Clay Matthews Jr. episode of Stack Sats or Die Trying. And for those that are here for the first time, salute to you. We appreciate getting new people to watch the show whenever that happens. And if you're watching in the village, that means you're watching early. Congratulations. You know what I'm saying? You get that early content. If you're not in the village, make sure to join the village by going to blackwealthrebels.com. That is how you join our community where we drop, this episode as well as other podcasts early, as well as exclusive content for our community known as the village. Episode 57. I love making this body of work known as Stack Sats or Die Trying. Everyone knows I have two loves when it comes to personal finance. That is Bitcoin and real estate. And speaking of real estate, I have a new real estate podcast, right? That just dropped yesterday. If you're watching this on, when it drops into the public, that means that, the new episode of the Philly Row Home Report has dropped. Philadelphia Row Home Report is my new podcast about Philadelphia real estate and real estate in general, but, specifically about Philadelphia because that is where my specialty is. So if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or something like that, you're watching Stack Sats on Friday, the day it drops, and Philly Row Home Report comes out Thursday. You know what I'm saying? I got Thursday and Friday on lock right now, but I digress. But if you're in the village, you've seen Philly Row Home Report, damn near a week ago, because again, the village gets everything early. With that being said, you're not here to hear me, pontificate or do commercials about everything else. You're here to talk about some Bitcoin. I mean, shout out to all my Bitcoiners out there who only tune into our shows to hear the Bitcoin talk. It's all good. I'm a Bitcoiner at heart. I love Bitcoin. Everything revolves around Bitcoin. You know what I'm saying? So let's get into it. By the way, this episode 57, I want to talk about the maturation of Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin is maturing right in front of our eyes. And no matter what the people say, no matter what the haters say, they can't deny that Bitcoin is maturing right in front of our eyes. So let's talk about it. And I have a slide deck. That's right. You know what I'm saying? 2025, we going crazy with the slide decks. Listen, yo, I tell you, I'm an educator at heart. I love to teach, and I love, doing my little slide decks. Although I hate slide decks for meetings, by the way. That's a side note. You know what I'm saying? But in terms of just educating, I love slide decks. So calling this Bitcoin's evolution, it's emerging as a mature financial asset. It's entering a different phase, right? It's entering a more mature and institutional phase. So if you look at recent developments, that signals a transformation of the asset, right? It signals a transformation from a speculative asset to a legitimate financial infrastructure. So Bitcoin, right? This entire thing that was a movement that people laughed at, that people, shout out to everybody on Silk Road who was out there wilding with Bitcoin, but it's now moving to a different phase. And I know a lot of Bitcoiners hate to admit this, but the facts are what the facts are. You know what I'm saying? I ain't saying I'm better than you hoes. It is what it is, my Larry June voice. But the fact is, it's just in a different space right now. And this transformation is making it a real player in the financial infrastructure of our entire country rather. But I want to talk about that because there's a couple things happening in the Bitcoin space that should be paid attention to. A lot of people aren't familiar with or don't care or they're still hating, right? First thing I want to talk about is Strike. Everyone who watches this show faithfully knows that I have a big four where I buy my Satoshis from, right? Those are, say it with me, Fold, right? Fold, Strike, Swan, River. Those are my only four. I do not use Coinbase or Fedbase or shit Coinbase. I do not use that. I only Strike, Swan, River, Fold. That's it. Shout out to my people that Fold. I know I have a weird love affair with Fold, but Strike is somewhere else I use. I'm a huge fan of Jack Mallers, who is the CEO of Fold, or Strike rather. He's doing a lot of good things right now. I'm not going to bring up all the rest because this is about Strike. Strike is somewhere that I use because I love their capacity to use the Lightning Network, which there's a whole episode on the Lightning Network. If you haven't seen, go check that out. And if you're looking to actually sign up for any of the big four, Strike, Swan, River, Fold, it will all be in the show notes as well as the description. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, salute to my audio listeners. Salute to all the audio listeners of the real estate podcast too, because that's both audio and video. And if you're listening to the audio, I am going through a slide deck, but I'm still going to make sure you understand what I'm saying. This is right now what I'm looking at is a tweet from Strike. It says, "We're bringing real world utility to hashtag Bitcoin. Your hashtag Bitcoin, your terms, your future." What is Strike talking about, right? And shout out to Strike again. Jack Ma and Strike are doing amazing work. But what they're talking about is this. Strike now allows you to use Bitcoin as loan collateral. That's right. You can now get loan collateral on your Bitcoin. In previous episodes, I talked about how I use the ETF in place of actual Bitcoin, just from a financial engineering standpoint, to be able to use it as loan collateral. But now I can take my actual sats and use it as loan collateral with an institution that I already do business with, and with the institution that, I do have faith in, right? So what does this mean that Bitcoin is used as loan collateral? It means that it's recognized as true value. Companies now treat Bitcoin like legitimate collateral, which is similar to real estate or other securities. This validates its stability and its worth. We have companies now keeping Bitcoin on its balance sheet. We have companies allowing you to borrow against your Bitcoin. So it's becoming a part of the infrastructure of companies, and also infrastructure growth. Bitcoin lending reflects maturing financial infrastructure, because now we have custody solutions, and there's also risk management that's taking place when people are looking at what you have in the form of satoshis, right? And the protocols now mirror traditional finance, where if I have stock, I can get a margin loan. If I have real estate, I can get a loan against my asset. Now, if I have Bitcoin, I can get a loan against my asset to make other moves, right? This promotes what, in the space we call it hodling, hold on for dear life. This promotes that, right? Because loan against Bitcoin encourage long-term holding. So you can gain liquidity without having to liquidate your digital assets. That is a game changer. That's a game changer, because in the past, right, if I want to liquidate any sort of asset, I would have to sell the asset and then use it. Now I don't have to do that. So if I have a bunch of Bitcoin stacked up, not saying I do, I don't have any Bitcoin. It was all lost in a boating accident. But let's just say I did have some Bitcoin. I would be able to then take the Bitcoin, get a loan against it, and make a play. Let's say I find a single family piece of residential real estate, and I got somebody willing to, let me buy it for 10 grand. I could take, if I had 10 grand in Bitcoin, but I don't. But
I'm broke, baby. I ain't got no money. Bullshit.
If I had 10 grand in Bitcoin, say, well, probably gotta put up 20, 30, whatever that may be, whatever the LTV is, and get that 10 grand in Bitcoin. But I still have the Bitcoin, and I have the collateral to use to go make my play. Boom, make the play, refi, boom. You know what I'm saying? Boom. Anyway, that right there, if you look on the side of the screen for those watching the actual slide deck, is directly from Strike. That's what it looks like when you go in there. Bitcoin backed loans. This is a major in terms of the maturation of the space. Bitcoin backed loans are major, right? Here's a couple different screenshots that I have, from Strike that shows you that you can go in there. Now the APR is like 13 or 12%, and that's expected because, again, the space is getting, bigger. But right now, to get a loan on a piece of real estate is probably 8. So it's a couple more points, which is fine because, again, if you know how to use this now, this isn't for everybody. I want to make sure I clearly state that. I don't want anyone going out there taking loans, doing all kinds of ridiculous stuff, losing your money and say, yo, Jimmy said on Stack Stats to take loans. I'm not telling anybody to take loans. In fact, anything I say on here is not financial advice at all. It's for informational and educational purposes only, right? That's what it is. But if you need to know how to use this in terms of making moves, making plays, or you may need it for some sort of emergency, you now can access this, right? You can access this and not have to sell your Satoshis. Crazy part about it is they have it set up where you get like a smaller APR, like 12%, right? And you have monthly payments that you have to pay the monthly note on your loan. They got one where you just pay a maturity, right? Now they charge you an extra point for it, but the flexibility is wild. What they're building here is very powerful. And you can see screenshots of what I'm showing for those listening to the audio. Someone borrowing 75K, someone borrowing 50K. So, I mean, this is just dope. This is phenomenal. This is taking us to the next step. I know that more players, probably those in my big four, will be getting in the space. Those in my big four, like Fold, is getting ready to release the credit card. That's also part of the maturation. You know what I'm saying? There's all sorts of things happening. The big four, I talked about River. I have a whole episode on River, how River is paying interest out on the cash you have sitting with them. Between these big four, they have everything you need. You can literally use Fold to live on Bitcoin. As I do. Digress again. Let's keep it moving. Let's talk about the ETFs. And we've talked about the ETFs a number of times. on various episodes, but I'm bringing that up in this episode because this is also part of the narrative that I'm telling right now in terms of the maturation of the space. The ETFs provided a gateway to mainstream adoption, right? ETFs make Bitcoin available through traditional investment accounts. Retirement funds can now include the exposure, right? It gives the validation of going through the regulatory part. So a lot of people who believe that our government is here to protect us, I'm not saying one thing or the other, but there are people that believe that will actually really understand that this had to go through regulatory approval. So because it went through regulatory approval, it may be okay for them, right? It also brought in all kinds of institutional capital. Large financial institutions can now invest in Bitcoin. This shifts from retail speculation to institutional investment. You guys know I've mentioned it here several times. I am part of an investment club that over the last couple of years has put together, a small portfolio. It's more than $250,000 at this point. And we do have Bitcoin exposure within our investment fund. And that is through the ETF, because the ETF allows us to do it in a transparent way where no one has to control a wallet or anything like that. So from an institutional standpoint, that we have an actual collective that invests, ETF was very money for us, right? You know what I'm saying? Numbers, Larry June voice. All right. As y'all can tell, I've been listening to a lot of Larry June, but I see the here nor there.
Numbers. You're doing good. Numbers. Hey.
Market stability. Professional money managers create a more stable price environment, and volatility decreases with institutional involvement. So that helps to stabilize the market. The swings, we still see swings, but there haven't been as drastic since the ETF was adopted. It's not to say they won't be, because I don't want to have a huge swing and y'all say, you told me that. I didn't tell you nothing. What I'm saying is it hasn't been that way since the release of the ETF, right? So the last part I want to talk about is this. I want to talk about the fact that New Hampshire, right? They're the first state who this is May 6th. This just dropped May 6th. New Hampshire is the first state to pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill into law. Within a month, the treasurer of New Hampshire will be allowed to put money into Bitcoin. Listen, y'all. This is why I'm telling you, ETF, right? Getting loans against it. Laws being passed allowing treasurers to invest in Bitcoin, right? We saw what happened at the federal level, right? Now we have states within their budget allocating resources to Bitcoin. This is the maturation of the space. This is the maturation of the asset. This is how we get more capital flowing into the asset and how the asset becomes a more commonplace thing for people to use, because now all the different things that, I may have talked about or taught or used, one thing I do understand, and I know a lot of Bitcoiners get mad when I say this, and I probably should do a whole video on this. Some of us are nerds. I'm a nerd. I go deep into the weeds and I use technology and things that the average person won't. How things go to the next level is when you have, the average person, the average individual, just being able to operate in the space, to use the technology, to use the different facets of the technology that will allow them to use it day to day. That's how you get to this next level, right? The next level is not mom and pop sitting up there trying to do two-factor authentication and multi-sig, 7 out of 9. I understand already that the average person is not going to do that, right? The bell curve is a real thing, and most people are in the middle, right? There's those of us on the fringes who will be early adopters, who will go through shit coining, who will go through, losing money in different protocols just to come to the conclusion that, I could chill and do these things. But when the masses come, the masses are going to need different ways to be able to operate in this space that allow them to not have to get a computer science degree. So I say that to say, when you look at the different things that are happening, whether that's the ETF, whether that is Strike and others coming in with loans into the space, now looking at New Hampshire becoming the first state to pass the strategic Bitcoin reserve bill into law, more states will follow. And as more states follow, more capital will flow into the space. More studying will happen. There's a better understanding that's going to happen of why this is pristine collateral, right? So the government Bitcoin reserve, this is innovative public policy. New Hampshire's consideration of a Bitcoin reserve represents forward-thinking governance. It shifts Bitcoin from fringe tech to a strategic asset, right? It's forward-thinking. You need people to be progressive and to try things. right? So there's also a sovereign level recognition. Bitcoin joins gold and foreign currencies as a government reserve asset. This right here just legitimizes the store of value proposition that we've all been saying for a long period of time. You know, there's a lot of narratives surrounding Bitcoin. Bitcoin is real estate. Bitcoin is a store of value. Bitcoin is cash. And I've always said, and I maintain this, Bitcoin is different things to different people. And I say that to say, this puts it on a playing field with gold in terms of being a store of value when you have states and governments that are using it as such, right? This also adds to long-term confidence because, again, like I said, there are certain people who still love the government and believe the government has our best interest at heart. And I'm not saying they don't. Oh, no smoke. Leave me alone. What I'm saying is this signals belief in Bitcoin's staying power. The volatile asset gains recognition for its resilience. Bitcoin is resilient. Bitcoin has been up for years and years at this point. And, you know, TikTok, another block. Right. Bitcoin's maturing ecosystem. It went from speculative tech, right? It began as an experimental digital money, right? So then you have the financial infrastructure start to be built around it. It's becoming integral to modern finance. Initially, it was adopted by tech enthusiasts, right? There's a lot of tech enthusiasts, like I said, the early adopters, the nerds, the computer science folks. But now we're at a phase where we have institutional integration. It's now embraced by major financial players. You have some of the biggest institutions in the world, right? Right? In the world. I didn't say, you know, the States. I said in the world, who are embracing Bitcoin, using it as a strategic reserve, who are allowing you to borrow against it, who are putting together investment vehicles that utilize Bitcoin. There's a lot happening in this. Bitcoin taking a step to the next level. It's maturing right in front of our eyes. The great thing about this is we'll be able to say that, yo, I was born during the time of Bitcoin because it's going to continue to grow. The other thing I want to point out is for all you shitcoiners out there, you don't get news like this about the random shitcoin. You know, all the shitcoins that were supposed to solve the Dropbox storage problem or the problem with this and the gateway to that and help the banks make payments.
Fuck, I need to put it in subtitle or something.
You don't get this kind of news about them. The infrastructure that's being built around Bitcoin, that by itself should separate it from everything. I always tell you there's crypto and there's Bitcoin. There's crypto and there's Bitcoin. People get upset when I say that, but it is what it is. Like there's crypto and there's Bitcoin, right? But the thing is, when you look at what happens in the marketplace, you'll see all the things happen with Bitcoin. That's why this show is Stack Sats or Die Trying. It's not Stack Crypto or Die Trying. It's Stack Sats or Die Trying, and I'm always going to continue to say Stack Sats. Don't even worry about getting a full Bitcoin. Stack Sats, you have a full Bitcoin, right? But it's just evolving beyond simple speculation. The ecosystem now mirrors traditional finance, or TradFi, as we say, with sophisticated infrastructure and institutional participation. Like I said, Stack Sats or Die Trying. So I really want to have this conversation because a lot of times, like, we don't realize what's happening right in front of our faces or right in front of our eyes because we're so distracted by, where Shador got drafted or whether 100 people can beat a gorilla, all kinds of different distractions. You know what I'm saying? The freakiness of one Shannon Sharp, all the different craziness going on. Not that I don't laugh at those things and talk about those things. That's what our Friday show is for, by the way. Freedom Fridays, you know what I'm saying? That streams on the By the Hood channel, the Black Wealth Rebel channel. You could also watch in the Village. We go crazy on Fridays. Wealthy Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, we have a personal finance conversation. And on Sundays, right, we have our finance church where we talk about something in the stock market. So we're always on Wednesdays, Fridays, Sundays, and I've got multiple pods that drop through the week. So think about that. 3 live shows, 2 pods. That's 5 days. You have the opportunity to hear me, be a blatherskite. But I'm only going to be talking about 1 or 2 things. Most of the time it's Bitcoin. And if it's not Bitcoin, it's my business, right? Because I always tell you, my business is real estate, but I save in Bitcoin. I'm going to repeat that because to me, Bitcoin isn't an investment. My business is real estate and I save in Bitcoin. You know what I'm saying? In the words of Cameron Giles, I do both. Who am I to F tradition up?
I do both. Who am I to fuck tradition up?
Anyway, give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. How do you feel about the maturation of Bitcoin? What are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing in the Bitcoin space that let you know that it's taking it a step to the next level? If it's not loans, if it's not the ETFs, right? If it's not the government's putting up reserves and using it as a store of value, what is something that you're looking for, or that will give you an indication that we're going to the next level with Bitcoin? What kind of TradFi product and or service would you be interested in as a consumer? That's what I want to know. Leave that in the comment section below, or shoot me a tweet. I get a lot of inboxes on Twitter and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? You can hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm at JW Blueprint on everything. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you also check out, like I said, check out the new pod. I want to make sure you guys go check out the new pod as well, so we can, get a little support for that. That's called the Philly Row Home Report. You know what I'm saying? It's about real estate in Philadelphia. The funny thing about that show specifically is that I still, because I'm me, find a way to bring up Bitcoin even on that. I can't help myself, right? I was laughing as I was watching the first episode. I'm like, I mentioned Bitcoin a couple of times. I can't help it. You know what I'm saying? But I think that combination, right? And this is just my perspective again, that combination of Bitcoin and real estate is the most powerful combination in all of finance, right? And then you add a little bit of stock on the side of that. I know a lot of Bitcoiners like, man, you do everything Bitcoin. I do. Listen, I get it. I get why you say that, right? But having that cash come in to stack sats, having actual physical properties that I call my physical miners outside of the actual miners I have. You know what I mean? Also, shout out to everybody left me comments on all the different episodes. One of the comments I got recently on YouTube was asking me to go into solo mining versus pool mining. So I'm putting something together on that. Shout out to you who left a comment. I don't have it in front of me to give you props, but I appreciate you. I'm actually going to share your comment in the video. You know what I'm saying? Like I'll share it in the video when I make a video about that, because I think I'm going to cook on that. So, thank y'all for executive producing the show and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Got my other new bottle here. You know what I'm saying? I tag it all up. You know what I'm saying? The Bitcoin, the BitAx, you know what I mean? The miners and all that. So, listen, man, everything's good over here, man. Leave me some feedback. Join the village, blackwealthrebels.com. Pull up on Wednesday, pull up on Friday. By the way, on Friday, we give away free Bitcoin. We give away sats every Friday. So make sure to pull up for that. I appreciate all the support. I love you guys. Stay safe out there. And as always, stack sats or die trying. Peace.